The Axioma, a super yacht chartered out for appropriately eye-watering prices, promoted in this video. It went under the hammer this week.
Captain, thank you very much. We're going to catch back.
One yachting blogger went aboard in happier times.
This is the place to be. Sun deck, top of the world, Mom. I love it.
Axioma used to be called Red Square. Its owner, a sanctioned Russian oligarch, had his bank account frozen, couldn't pay a debt, so the bank asked for the ship to be seized in Gibraltar. Axioma, though, is a very unusual case. The debt and its ownership made it straightforward, alone among the 24 or so suspected Russian vessels seized worldwide.
Yachts are owned by companies for good reasons, but the identity of the beneficial owner is opaque, because the connection between the owning company and the beneficial owner, the actual human being, is a private arrangement between the owning company and the beneficial owner via corporate service providers.
In recent years, Russian billionaires have competed with one another to buy bigger and bigger yachts with the full array of toys from helicopters to submarines. It's this spirit of excess that made them such suitable targets for Western countries outraged at the invasion of Ukraine.
I think these oligarch yachts actually represent much more than just the yachts themselves. They really are symbols of the kleptocracy behind these oligarchs. These oligarchs were able to plunder and loot Russia in order to support Putin in his anti-democratic and authoritarian strategies, and then use that money in the West to corrupt our own systems, to clean their own money, and then to enjoy the very democracies that they're helping to destabilize.
It belongs to one of Putin's oligarch friends.
Back in March, the UK Transport Secretary appeared quayside to announce that the fee would not be allowed to slip away from its berth in London.
Well, we have held this ship, which we now know belongs to a Russian oligarch, because we're very clear we cannot have any benefit to these oligarchs with close connections to Putin whilst that terrible war is going on in Ukraine and so many people are suffering.
Having clapped their hands on super yachts worth hundreds of millions, the authorities in various Western countries then found things started to get a bit more complicated. Disputes arose over who actually owned the vessels and whether they should be subject to sanctions. In the case of the fee, the cost of keeping it tethered here while the arguments play out is €500,000 a week in lost revenue from charters, as well as the expense of crewing and berthing. Fee's master says the owner is not on any sanctions list, and the other vessels he owns are currently freely sailing French waters.
Action was taken against Fee to placate criticism from other European governments that the British government were not doing enough to counter the war in Ukraine.
And your position is that he is not a sanctioned individual, the owner of the vessel?
That's not my position, that's fact.
Right, so in fact, you're arguing there's no reason why the fee shouldn't be allowed to just get underway and leave.
There's no logical, fair or just reason. Mr. Shaps has arbitrarily introduced a regulation, and he has said he will continue to disrupt the lives of the Russian elite. Whether or not they are sanctioned, whether or not they are associated with Putin, whether or not they've had anything to do with this conflict.
Vessels were seized early on in Fiji, Spain, Italy and the UK. Among those stopped in Italy is the Scheherazade, alleged to belong to Vladimir Putin himself. But many were able to escape, including the Graceful, also linked to the Russian president, which sailed to the far from balmy waters of Kaliningrad just before the invasion of Ukraine. Similarly, the Nord, belonging to a sanctioned billionaire, made it all the way to Vladivostok. But others soon realized their floating palaces would still be welcomed in the Emirates, for example, where a couple are berthed, and Roman Abramovich's two vast yachts, Eclipse and Solaris, are among those now cruising in Turkish waters. Very agreeable.
There is, of course, now, this diplomatic question of countries like Turkey and the United Arab Emirates, particularly Turkey, since they are a member of NATO. And of course, Putin claims that this is a war against NATO. And clearly that's not the case. NATO has welcomed the Russian oligarchs and their yachts and their planes with open arms. We even see, in fact, that a number of the yachts that found a so-called safe haven for now in Turkey, they're out cruising. I mean, they may not be in Sardinia this summer, but they're in Turkey, which is quite beautiful, and it's a great place for sailing.
Meanwhile, for several of the yachts detained, there's little chance that their ownership can be speedily resolved.
If you take, for example, Scheherazade, currently being detained in Italy, is said to be beneficially owned by Vladimir Putin himself. So when you're dealing with state actors like that, senior politicians, realistically, how are you ever going to get sufficient material together to establish beneficial ownership?
The business of targeting oligarchs' yachts has proven to be a voyage of discovery. As with many other sanctions, initiatives launched at the outset have proven hard to implement, and much of the fleet symbolising Russia's excess has simply diverted to safer shores.